Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Anna Sielaff. I am the local history librarian at the Public Library in Springfield, Illinois. I work in the Sangamon Valley Collection, which is our local archive in Springfield. And just by show of hands, has anyone ever been to the Sangamon Valley Collection? Yeah, a handful of people. Yeah, it's a pretty remarkable collection, and I don't want to be biased, but we have so many materials. But the unique thing about our archive, it covers not only Springfield and Sangamon County, but it covers the other surrounding counties, so like Logan County, because at one time, Sangamon County used to be all of the counties in the central Illinois area. So, but yeah, I've been at the library going on 3 years this coming October, and it's been an amazing experience for me. But for those of you who don't really know me, I was born and raised here in Lincoln, Illinois, and my parents are here tonight. So, but yeah, I was born and raised here in Lincoln, Illinois, and the Edward Trace. This is a topic that I've been doing research on since I was like 13 years old. I like to say it's like a family project. It's something my dad and I bond over when we do research or we travel. And I'll say about a couple days ago, we actually went somewhere to look at a portion of the trail not too long ago. So you guys will get to see pictures of that tonight. So the goal of this presentation is to give you all a broad perspective of just how Illinois developed before and after it became a state in 1818. Illinois has a rich history that not too many people know about. So, for example, when we think of the colonial era, I bet some of us think about that in the East Coast. We have to remember, though, there were actually Europeans here in the area before the 1700s. So another thing I forgot to mention, too, this is a new thing, but I recently became an Illinois Rhodes Scholar through the Illinois Humanities, and this program was actually chosen out of the two I'm doing through the Illinois Humanities for the 250th anniversary of the United States. So yeah, so I'm really excited about it. So being a Rhodes Scholar, I get to travel all over the state of Illinois to do programs, and my other program that I do is women's baseball. So I'm sure some of us heard about the Women's Baseball League coming to Springfield. We also had a team in Springfield called the Springfield Sallies. I always have to mention that because they are part of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. So yeah, so not too far from Lincoln, Illinois. So to begin, so how did Illinois become a state? So remember, there were Europeans here before the 1700s. Now the Edwards Trace, it's an ancient trail that's over 3,000 years old and runs through Illinois, marking the migratory path of herds and animals. Now, the Native Americans utilized this trail to follow seasonal migrations of herds and used the trace for hunting, trade, and war. Now, the trace was the main route from Kaskaskia, Illinois. Are we familiar with Kaskaskia? First state capital? Okay. From Kaskaskia in southern Illinois to present-day Peoria. And Kaskaskia and Peoria, they're actually settled by French settlers a long time ago. Now, the European colonists actually used this trail as a route to travel, and also the Native Americans. But I like to call this the Route 66 of its time, because everyone used this trail to travel. Now, I love maps. I'm a librarian, or an archivist also. I love looking at old maps. And I forgot to print some maps out for you guys to look at, but if you guys are interested in looking at these maps, please let me know. But these maps, though, were actually given to me by a friend of mine, Luke Moore. I'm sure some of you have heard that name. Luke Moore, David Brady, they actually are researchers who've been doing research on the Edwards Trace for probably about 30 years at this point. But they actually were able to get these old maps, and this map here is actually one of the oldest maps of Illinois, or when Illinois was a territory. Now, this map was actually done by a man named Rene Paul. He was a city surveyor in St. Louis, and his job, he basically had the job to create this map on the Indiana territory and on the Illinois territory. So you're probably wondering, Anna, what makes this map unique? If you look closely at this map, Renee Paul's map, 1815, do you guys see this red line on the map? On it, if you look at this map, it says the Edwards Trace. 1815, Edwards Trace on this map. So that's a primary document that mentions the Edwards Trace. So, and on this map, you can see it starting at Fort Russell in Edwardsville, Illinois, going all the way up to Lake Peoria. And throughout this presentation, we'll see more of this map as I keep talking. Trust me, you'll see more of this map later. Another map I love looking at too is this 1860 map, and this actually was done by a man named Major Stephen Long, and he has a pretty unique story. He was a Dartmouth College trained mathematician and explorer, and he was assigned to Fort Bellefontaine in Missouri, so like near the St. Louis area, in the summer of 1816, in charge of evaluating the fortifications within the Illinois territory, as well as improvements that could be made, like such as transportation. So he took a trip by boat up to Fort Clark to Peoria Lake in Peoria, Illinois, to evaluate the forts in the area, and then he took the Edwards Trace, passing through central Illinois. And he then followed an overland route passing through the Cahokia Mounds. So the reason why I took a screenshot of this map, can you guys see the Cahokia Mounds on this? That's pretty remarkable to see that. And this is an 1816 map of the Illinois territory. This map, though, has to be probably one of my favorite maps. The color of it's beautiful, very beautiful. And this map was created in 1819 by a man named Daniel Smith. Now, Daniel Smith was involved in the 1819 Kickapoo Treaty deliberations in Edwardsville, Illinois. He drafted a map of Illinois to represent the land of Kickapoo that were signing away and relied on landmarks that the Kickapoo would recognize. So what makes this map unique too, and I'm sorry it's kind of hard to see a little bit, on this right picture here, I zoomed in on this map. There's a dotted line, and you see different areas that are labeled, so towns. And again, you'll see this map later in the presentation. On here, you see in a circle, Elkhart, Illinois. That dotted line is the Edwards Trace. So we have 3 maps right now that have the Edwards Trace on them. That's pretty remarkable. And for me as a researcher, historian, doing this for a while, it's hard to find primary documents on this particular topic. And these maps, these are great resources to use for this research, for sure. So I'm still becoming familiar with a lot of the native tribes in the area, but this map here, I'm a visual learner, and this gives me an idea where a lot of these tribes were located in Illinois. So in the 17th century, we have the Illini. So a group of tribes, the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Cahokia, Tamora, and the Michigammia. Am I saying that right? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. So this group, they shared similar language, customs. And then you start to see in the 18th century, so I'm sure we're familiar with the Kickapoo, Fox, Sauk, and the Potawatomi tribes. And on this map, this focuses more on the 18th century here in Illinois. So you see the Potawatomi up in northern Illinois, so like Peoria and further north. And of course, in central Illinois, we see like the Kickapoo in the area. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. So why did the Native Americans and the early pioneers use, quote, this old Indian trail? Does anyone have an answer? I'm curious. What do you guys think?
It's accessible.
Okay, accessible. Okay.
It was used a lot.
It was used a lot, yeah. Uh-huh.
They were following maybe the buffalo herds.
Okay, that's a good answer. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, the land was flat.
Okay. Okay, land
And
was
there was
fought.
plenty of water.
Water, okay. Anyone else? Okay. So remember, harsh winter conditions. The rivers were frozen. They couldn't use the rivers during winter time. We have to remember, Illinois was a swamp. Very swampy area. And then tall prairie grass. Now it's really funny when I've talked to kids, when I've done this presentation for kids, I think it's hard for them to visualize Illinois being a prairie state. Because a lot of the prairie, the original prairie, is going extinct. You'd be lucky if you saw some prairie, maybe even along a railroad track. But like the prairie though, it was tall, probably taller than these cabinets. So it was hard to see. And like someone said, using the trail was an easier way to travel. Now this map was created by David Brady, Tracy Garrison, and Luke Moore. And this kind of just gives you a visual of just how long the trail is. So here, this part of the trail starts in Edwardsville, and it's going all the way up to Peoria. It's about 146 miles long from Edwardsville to Peoria. And I've had this question before. What's a trace versus a trail? Now, a trace is a mark left by someone or something. So this could be a path, trail, footprint, or a sign of something that existed years ago. A trail is used specifically to refer to a path that someone took. So there's some differences between trace and trail. So like I said earlier, Illinois was a French territory. The French were the first Europeans to be here. So I'm sure some of us are familiar with French explorers, Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet. Yeah? So they traveled the Mississippi River hoping to find a waterway that emptied into the Pacific Ocean. The two explorers followed the Mississippi to Arkansas as they realized that the river flowed south into the Gulf of Mexico, or today the Gulf of America, right? But when traveling north, they arrived at the mouth of the Illinois River and later encountered a lake known as the Pimtoe. I can't pronounce it, Pitomawe, by the Illinois, which later became known as Peoria, so Lake Peoria. Now, Marquette and Joliet's journey opened the Illinois region to explorers, French explorers and fur traders. The French explorers and settlers eventually relocated their missionary work and their fur trading interests to new locations along the Mississippi River. And the French established their missionaries in Cahokia. We're familiar with Cahokia, Illinois. So Cahokia in 1699 and Kaskaskia in 1703. Making these the oldest towns in Illinois. Now, remember, French were the first Europeans here in Illinois, or in the area, and they had contact with the Native Americans, and they were the first to govern this land, that is now Illinois, and the first to build forts. And the Illinois country came to the attention of the French during the mid-1600s, and these families, though, these French families, when you think about it, they left their home country and they were not looking to find independence. They brought their customs and traditions to build a community here in the Illinois territory. Now the French and Native Americans, they had good relations as they saw each other as allies. And the French mainly relied on the Native Americans for survival and fur trade wealth. So has anyone ever heard of the American bottom? Some people know, not. So French explorers and settlers, they established outposts along, like I said, the Mississippi River while seeking a route to the Pacific Ocean, originally looking for gold and other riches while traveling south of the Mississippi River. They instead found good soil, which is now known as the American bottom. So this map is actually the American bottom. And it's the American bottom is like a fluvial plain between the Mississippi River and the cliffs bordering the river. And this is where Kaskaskia is located. And I know, like I said, it's kind of hard to see on this right now, but on here it has Kaskaskia Village. And you also see Prairie du Chouar on here. I'm sure some of us have heard of Prairie du Chouar. So this area was really the first area where the French, you're starting to see settlements being built in southern Illinois where Kaskaskia is. So one of my favorite places to visit is Prairie du Chouart. I mean, I know it's not really big, but I love going to this fort here, Fort Deschartres. Has anyone ever been to Fort Deschartres before? No? Yes? No? So this fort was built twice due to flooding. And the fort never saw battle. It was like their headquarters, the French's headquarters. And really, it was just kind of more built as like a symbol, really, than anything to show like French power in Illinois. So, but Prairie du Chouart, the Edwards Trace actually goes through Prairie du Chouart too. And, but I definitely, anyone who's traveling in southern Illinois, definitely check out Fort Deschartres. It's a phenomenal fort. And it's funny when I talk to kids too, they're like, we have forts in Illinois? I'm like, yeah, we do. So they always get excited when they see some of these pictures of the fort down in Prairie du Chouart. French Cahokia. I don't know if anyone's gone to Cahokia before, but they have some very old buildings. One of my favorites is the Church of the Holy Family. So that was founded in 1799. And you can tell that these are French buildings because based off the architecture, the logs, they're vertical. And you can tell like these are old French buildings. And they also still have like the Cahokia Courthouse in Cahokia, Illinois. And with the Church of the Holy Family, I remember this when I first went there. They actually have all of the priests that preached here behind the church. So going back from 1700s up to the 1800s, and they're all buried behind this old church. So it's really a great place to visit, I think. So definitely check that out if you guys are in Cahokia. So I've actually gone to meet Robert Mazerum. Maybe some of you have heard that name before. He's an archaeologist, historian in the Springfield area. And he too, like David Brady and Luke Moore, he's done research, an extensive amount of research on the Edwards Trace, probably since the 80s, 90s. And he actually has books written based off like his research on the Edwards Trace in French Illinois. And he's done like a lot of digs down in southern Illinois. And I kind of took this quote, but only recently, and this is Robert Mazerum, only recently have we begun to recognize the importance of such trails in the formation of early American settlements, and in particular the importance of a single trail that formed the link between the old French villages and the American bottom and the fur trading communities at Peoria Lake. That says a lot about this old trail. It connected all of them together. So, French and Indian War in 1763. Remember, I'm a visual learner, so I was glad I was able to find these maps. So, French area, 1634 to 1763. All the green here is basically controlled by the French. By 1763, the British take over, and Illinois actually becomes Virginia. I'm sure some of us didn't know, maybe knew that we were part of Virginia at one time. Maybe? Yeah. So the French take over. So after the French and Indian War, the Illinois country and the French settlements, like I said, they passed rule to Great Britain after the Treaty of 1763. And then when the American Revolution began, the British territory was overrun with Native Americans and British forces. During this time, various Native American tribes were allies to the British, and much of this region, so this region on the right, had long been claimed as Virginia. So is anyone familiar with George Rogers Clark? Yeah, maybe if you took an Illinois history course, you know that name? Yeah. So George Rogers Clark, he was commissioned by Virginia Governor Patrick Henry to gather troops to capture Kaskaskia and the Illinois country from the British and their Native American allies. So after a 2-month journey, Clark and 175 troops arrived to Kaskaskia the night of July 4th, 1778. The village was taken without gunfire as Clark secured Kaskaskia for the United States. Now, during the Revolutionary War, Kaskaskia was still populated by French settlers as they supported the American efforts. This victory doomed British control of the Illinois country, and it was Clark's first step in capturing the western headquarters of the British at Detroit. So here's another map to get an idea of how far George Rogers Clark traveled. So after the initial success of Clark's campaign, Henry Hamilton, and British officer and lieutenant governor of Detroit, so Detroit, and this is up in Michigan area, so called for a counterattack, marching from Fort Detroit to Fort Sackville, arriving at December 18th in 1778. Once in Vincennes, Hamilton took control, and Vincennes is in Indiana. Hamilton took control of the fort and demanded that the French townspeople took an oath of allegiance to the British crown. So you see Clark traveling from Kaskaskia over into the Indiana area after conquering Kaskaskia. So Hamilton's actions led to a daring counterattack by George Rogers Clark, which led to the recapture of the fort by Clark as combined forces of American militia and French volunteers on February 25th, 1779. So, kind of going back to Kaskaskia. Has anyone ever been to Kaskaskia before? There's nothing. Okay, one couple. There's nothing there. Really. I mean, there's a population of like 20 there. And to think that it was our state capital, it was huge when it was our state capital. And we kind of have to remember in our minds that really Illinois started in southern Illinois. So you see the population growing from southern to central and then up to northern Illinois. So, Clark, he conquered Kaskaskia. In celebration of Clark's victory over the British, the people of Kaskaskia rang the Western Liberty Bell. Has anyone ever heard the Western Liberty Bell? Okay, so this bell, it's still in Kaskaskia. And it was actually given by King Louis XV of France to the Catholic Church here, which is on the right here. And this is actually one of the oldest churches in the area. And to think that this happened on July 4th, and July 4th, declaring our independence, like this is an event that happened, years later too. But they rang this bell in celebration of Clark's victory. So, but this is something though, like the bell is, you can still visit the bell. It's in this small building right by the church. And it's kind of fun. You can ring the bell and the doors open automatically. But just to give you a visual, so this is what Kaskaskia is. So like in 1841, this is what it looked like. And this is picture, and it's in color in that little building where the Western Liberty Bell is. It's behind the Western Liberty Bell, but this is what our first state capitol looked like. And then in 1993, this flood, does everyone remember the 93 flood?
Oh, yes.
Okay, because I don't, I wasn't born yet. So, but yeah, so it's just a small town. And it's crazy to think that our capital was down there at one time. But I forgot to mention too, has anyone ever been to the Philadelphia Liberty Bell?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing. Did you know that our bell here in Illinois is older than that bell? In Philadelphia?
Nope.
We have bragging rights, everyone. We have bragging rights, so yeah. So you guys are probably wondering, how is Clark connected to the Edwards Trace? He actually took a portion of that Edwards Trace from Kaskaskia to Cahokia. And here's like a depiction of him during his treaty negotiations with the Native Americans along the trail. And this is actually, the one on the right is actually a painting that's in the Illinois State Capitol in Springfield, in the building. But he took that trail. So that's how, I was about to say Abraham Lincoln, George Rogers Clark is connected. He took that trail from Kaskaskia to Cahokia during those negotiations. So I actually retraced the trail probably in graduate school, so about 3 years ago. And this was actually something new for me, I didn't know about. But the French, they actually gave the portion of the trail from Kaskaskia to Cahokia a name, and they called it the Kaskaskia-Cahokia Trail. And there's these brown signs along this trail, and they, which is something I really hope in the future that we can do for the rest of the Edwards Trace. But the reason I'm talking about this trail, the Edwards Trace, it has connecting trails. Has anyone ever heard connecting trails before? So when I say that it starts in Kaskaskia, the trail technically starts in Kaskaskia. It's all one trail. But because the French called Kaskaskia to Cahokia, this Kaskaskia-Cahokia Trail, it had different names. And it's also believed that there's a connecting trail from Peoria up to Galena, Illinois. So does that make sense? Yeah. So the trail was given different names for various reasons throughout time. And we'll talk a little more about that. So I'm sure we've all know Ninian Edwards. Everyone familiar with Ninian Edwards? Okay. So Ninian Edwards, he was born in Maryland, and he actually began his career in Kentucky, where he served as a legislator and judge. And just kind of seeing on here, he had a list of accolades. He was our U.S. Illinois Senator. He was actually the first territorial governor of Illinois. And then he was our third governor of Illinois. And when he was in politics, I mean, he was a really well-known political figure of his time. And James Madison, he appointed Edwards to be the first and only governor of the Illinois Territory. So before Illinois was a state. And really his duty was to oversee the territory's transition into statehood. So there's an Abraham Lincoln connection, guys. So Ninian W. Edwards, I always call him Ninian Jr. His son married Elizabeth Todd, so Mary Todd's sister. So we have a connection with the Edwards family and the Lincoln family. So yeah, that's really neat. Has anyone ever been to the Edwards home? Just out of curiosity in Springfield? Okay, they have like a Mary Todd Lincoln and Abraham Lincoln's The Love Bench. Yeah, so that's really neat to see. So, like I said, there's a connection between the Edwards family and the Lincoln family. So, War of 1812. So this war originated in disputes between the United States and England regarding shipping rights on the open seas, and also involving fur trade, westward settlement, and relations with the Native Americans. In Illinois, the War of 1812 was known as the Indian War, which pitted the Native American loyals to the British against American settlers who continued to occupy new land in the West. So I'm sure we're familiar with the story of the attack of Fort Dearborn, which was up in the Chicago area. So the attack of Fort Dearborn, there was an American post up in Chicago, and this fort was actually overtaken by the Potawatomi. And 66 American settlers died, and 15 Potawatomi warriors died. So, Black Partridge, he's someone, I don't know if anyone's ever heard Black Partridge before. He's actually someone who I've been wanting to do a lot more research on, and this is actually something new for me doing my research over the last couple years. But Black Partridge, he was the Potawatomi chief when this attack happened in Fort Dearborn. And he was well respected with a lot of other native tribes and also white settlers in the area. And, he actually supported the Illinois Territory. He supported these white settlers. And Black Partridge, he heard about what was about to happen to Fort Dearborn. And he was actually going to try to stop this attack. And when this attack happened, he actually saved a lot of white settlers during this attack. And this statue here is actually a depiction of him saving a woman named, I always forget her name, Margaret Helm. And this statue was actually up in Chicago, but they took it down about 5-6 years ago. So, yeah, and this is kind of a statue that remembered that day of the attack of Fort Dearborn.
Okay, why did they take it down? I'll forget when it's all over with.
I can't remember what year. I know it's within the last 10 years. I don't know exactly, but last 5-6 years there's been a lot of statues taken down. So, but I don't know exactly why. Yeah. So, but yeah, so he actually saved people during this attack. So word got down to Fort Russell, and Fort Russell was in Edwardsville, Illinois. So, and during this war, you're starting to see tensions between the Kickapoo and the Potawatomi Indians, and also who claimed lands north of Fort Russell. And you're seeing more tension between the white settlers and some of these native tribes. But when word got down to Edwardsville, people were scared. They didn't know what was happening about, that happened up in Fort Dearborn. So this prompted, and remember, Ninian Edwards, he was the territorial governor during this time. This attack prompted him to form a militia of rangers to take this old trail up to attack Native American villages along this old Indian trail. And his campaign ended in the attack of the Potawatomi village at Lake Peoria. Sadly, I mentioned Black Partridge. He came back to his village destroyed. Some of his family members were killed. So then, in retaliation, he and his his tribe actually went down to Fort Russell and attacked too. But they surrendered. So it's hard. You see this tension right now along this old trail. But because of this campaign, that's why the Edwards Trace got its name, because of this campaign. So remember, the trail was given different names for various reasons, but because of this campaign in 1812, during the War of 1812, they named it the Edwards Trace in honor of Ninian Edwards and his efforts during the war. So why does the Edwards Trace play a significant role in southern and central Illinois? Like I said, the trail was the main route. It was the Route 66 of its time. It was a source of travel. And towns such as Springfield, Lincoln, Illinois, Edwardsville, they were founded due to the location, due to the proximity of the trail. So the trail was close by. So, sometimes the past has its own way of leaving its own marks or hidden clues for future generations to discover. I love my job as a librarian. I do a lot of research for patrons. I always feel like a detective all the time. And with this, research, you feel like a detective. So here, this is Logan County, our home, Logan County. I'm sure we're familiar with James Latham. Yeah, James Latham, he was one of the first settlers in Logan County. He had a farm in the Elkhart area. He arrived here in 1819 from Kentucky to settle on Elkhart Hill. We're all familiar with Elkhart Hill. And he actually he purposely put his farm right by the Edwards Trace. So he wasn't far from that trail. And today, though, you can actually see a portion of that trail, and you see Abraham Lincoln right here. He's actually riding a horse. Well, this is an actor, by the way. But this is a portion of the trail on Elkhart Hill that you can actually see today. And that piece of the trail is not too far from Latham Cemetery. So it's not far from where Latham lived on Elkhart Hill. So that is something that you can still see today. And there's, they actually named it Edwards Trace Road. So there's actually a green road sign right there, at Elkhart Hill, that kind of directs you to where the Edwards Trace is. So that is something that you can still see today. So, like I said, Latham, he purposely put his home near the trail because it's easy to travel, easy to use. So I told you guys I'd bring this map up again. So this is Daniel Smith's 1819 map, so the one with the dots. We see Elkhart right here that's circled. But when you go further up, though, there's a little house maybe, or another circle. And you see Sugar Creek on the side, too. Kickapoo Village. Now that's Lincoln, Illinois. So Lincoln, Illinois is on this map. So Lincoln Memorial Park. I'm sure we've all heard the story about the Gillum family. Probably. Has everyone heard the Gillum story? So the Gillum family, they were originally from Kentucky, and the children and wife of this family were abducted by the Kickapoo and taken all the way to Kickapoo Town, which is now Memorial Park, Lincoln Memorial Park. So it's believed that this family, these kids and the mother, they actually traveled along the Edwards Trace. And Ann Gillum, she was the first Caucasian woman to see this area, to lay eyes in Logan County in central Illinois. Now, I'm a associate board member of the Illinois State Historical Society, and there's actually a great article written in the Journal of the Illinois State Historical Society. I don't know if anyone ever has seen these books before. Mary Rose, she's a historian. She actually wrote a great paper about the Gillum family and like all the renditions of the story. There's so many different renditions of this story that were told by so many different historians from when this happened in the 1790s up to now the 21st century. And so, but if you guys ever have questions or if you want to look more into their story, definitely look at this book. Even if you want to make copies of the chapter, you're welcome to do that with this book. So, but yeah, if you guys have questions, though, this is a great article that talks in more detail about the Gillum family coming over to Illinois. So we're seeing this map again. So, Kickapoo Town. So this Renee Paul map, and it's one of my favorites, like I said, this is the Illinois Territory map in 1815. And you see those teepees? That's Kickapoo Town. So that's another primary document that shows us where Kickapoo Town is. And it's along the Edwards Trace, that red line right there. So another neat thing about this trail, so before there was roadside advertising, so like, signs, there was actually trail trees. And, trail trees, they are a flexible sapling that would be tied down to the ground. And this is what the Native Americans would do, but they would do it while they were traveling. And when the saplings grew over time, they would be bent in a weird way, like in an angle. They actually did this along the Edwards Trace. And at Lincoln Memorial Park, we actually have a trail tree here in Logan County. And my dad, he actually is the one that found this trail tree. So if you see it, this tree is bent in an angle. And remember, this is Lincoln Memorial Park, Kickapoo Village area. When you go down, like when you're looking at this trail tree, you guys see this rut in this photo? Mm-hmm. That's the Edwards Trace. That's the trail that came through Lincoln, Illinois. So we actually have a portion of the Edwards Trace here in Lincoln and a trail tree that's showing us that's the trail. So here's another picture of like that rut you can see. And you guys can kind of picture, like, for me, I can picture like wagons going along this trail or even people on horseback. But you see that rut though right there. And we actually, and I'm remembering, I was actually 13 when all this happened. But David Brady actually came out to, basically, look at the lands, do some measurements, and he can confirm that this is the Edwards Trace. Him and Luke Moore and Tracy Garrison can confirm that this is the trail. So here's Daniel Smith's map again. I'm sure some of us are familiar with Robert Music.
I think he's related to me.
Is he? Okay. Yeah.
Music's, I'm pretty sure he is.
Oh, cool.
There's a cemetery out there.
Yeah, I've been to that. Well, I was like 13 last time I was out there. but yeah, so I've been to the cemetery before. But Robert Music, he also was one of the early pioneers here in Logan County. And like Latham, he purposely put his home right by the Edwards Trace. And when you go out to that farm, you can actually see the old trail right near, like from that cemetery, the Music Cemetery. And Music, and I did a little more research about Robert Music a while ago, but he actually had good relations with like a lot of the Native Americans in the area. And, and I can't imagine him, like I like to think with him, he probably saw a lot that happened along that road when you think about it. But one of the the funny story, he lost a toe, and I don't know if anyone knows this story, but he lost a toe from one foot, and his four-toed foot was a great curiosity to like a lot of these Native Americans, and some of them actually called him man without toe. Yeah, man without toe. I thought that was funny. So yeah, so here we see Robert Music. He's also connected to the Edwards Trace, putting his farm right near the trail. So this is actually a portion that was recently discovered about 2 years ago by Luke Moore and David Brady and Tracy Garrison. And my dad and I actually went out to the farm, and this is actually near Hartsburg, Illinois, and you can see like these ruts again. So I like to brag whenever I do this program in different areas. Logan County has the most portions that you can see compared to other areas. So we're kind of on a roll right now. So 2005, Lincoln College, there was a woolly mammoth tusk that was found. I'm sure some of us remember that back in 2005. This woolly mammoth tusk was actually found like Sugar Creek, so near the Edwards Trace. So remember the animals were the ones that created the trail? That goes back 3,000 years and more ago. So that's another piece of evidence that we have about this old trail. Now this is the place that my dad and I visited last week. He actually learned about this place doing a tour with Luke Moore, David, Tracy Garrison. They do tours along the Edwards Trace. And if you guys want to learn more about that, please let me know. I'll show you where to go. But this is actually in Buffalo Heart. So the trace went through Buffalo Heart. And even on this map, and I forgot to mention, on one of the maps, Buffalo Heart is actually written on that map. So so this is a portion, you can see the rut. And this actually went through an old cemetery. And there's only like 2 or 3 tombstones in this cemetery. But there's probably more people buried there that we just don't know about. So this is another portion that was discovered by Luke Moore and Tracy and David as of recently. So Lake Springfield. So in Springfield, Illinois, there's a lake called Lake Springfield. Lake Springfield is a man-made lake. We have to remember that. It's a man-made lake. And there's actually a portion that's you can see in Springfield, Illinois. So the trace went through Springfield, Illinois. And there's actually a historical marker there, and this actually, the dedication was back in 2001. William Furry, he actually works at the Illinois State Historical Society. He and David Brady were instrumental in getting this historical marker at Lake Springfield. So you guys can actually visit this, and this picture was taken in the early 2000s. So here you can see the trail, and this is a great example of what it looked like. And like I said, I picture wagons going through this old trail. I don't know who the person is in this photo, but you have a person standing on the trail. So you see those ruts though. So Springfield has a great visible portion of that trail. So you guys can go out there too. It's right near Lake Springfield, near the zoo. So I know they have like a marker, like a brown sign that tells you where to go to see the trail. So Lake Drive, thank you. Yeah. So Zimri ate Enos. So the Enos family, and this is like a Springfield, Salmon County local, but his family, he remembers the old trail when he was a kid. And he actually wrote a whole article for the journal Illinois State Historical Society back in 1911 about the Edwards Trace. And I took this quote, but here, this is what Zimri Enos said. Can any of the surviving first settlers of Salmon County or the descendants of the first settlers locate the line or any part of the old Indian trail from Peoria through county to St. Louis? This trail or trace should be, as an interesting matter of history, be definitely established before all evidence of its location is gone. That's a powerful statement right there. Very powerful. And it's kind of sad though, because this trail, it's been destroyed. A lot of it's been destroyed. It's endangered when you think about it. It's endangered because not too many people know about it. So I mean, it's covered by cornfields now, covered by roads, so like Bunker Hill, Illinois. Has anyone ever been to Bunker Hill? The trail went through Bunker Hill, but there's a road that covers it now. But they have a historical marker, thankfully. So I mean, it's endangered. It's being destroyed because no one knows about it. And so I'm so glad that he wrote this article, because really I think his article really helped a lot of historians, especially like Robert Mazerum and David Brady, to start this research, because they became curious about this old Indian trail. So these are the guys. I always have to talk about Luke and David and Tracy. But like I said, they've been doing this for over 20 years. And Luke, he lives in Kentucky, and but he's originally from Springfield. And but yeah, they've been doing this for over 20 years, and they've done amazing work. And I feel like every time I do a program, like I always have to give them a shout out, because of them, this trail is starting to be preserved. People are talking about it. And they actually, and this is something that you guys can actually go online. So all these maps that I have and everything, they have on their own website called Rabbit's Row. And I have if you want to scan that too, that'll take you directly to the website. But what they've been doing, like in the last 10, 15 years, they've been actually using LiDAR, so to scan the land. And that's how they've been able to find portions of this trail, and then comparing it to the old maps they've collected over the last 10 to 20 years. So like the maps I've showed you today. So, but they also have a really great article called Documenting the Everett Trace, and it definitely goes into detail about the history of the trail, and also remember some of those map makers I talked about. So it's a great article, so that's also online. And for me, I kind of got back into this research back in grad school. I created an interactive story map, and I really wanted to create something that would allow people just to take a vacation, go along the Edwards Trace, and make it fun and educational for students and families. So my best friend Sam and I actually retraced the trail about 3 years ago, and the first time I actually retraced that trail was back in 2012 with my parents, because I couldn't drive then. But but it was pretty amazing for me to do that again and to see how much had changed in in that 10 to 12 year period. So, and this is kind of what my website looks like. So it's giving you like different points to travel along the Everett Trace. So yeah, but no, thank you guys so much. I'm always happy to answer questions, and if you guys ever want to visit the Seaman Valley collection, please come. It's a remarkable collection. We actually have materials on the Edwards Trace, and even just materials on Lincoln, Illinois. So thank you guys so much for coming tonight. This is definitely one of my favorite topics to talk about, so thank you.
Anna?
Yeah.
Where the sign that you had a picture of the kidnapped settler,
Yeah.
where is that sign physically located?
At Memorial Park near the baseball field out there. I'm thinking right near the baseball field.
There's one on the by the tennis courts too.
Yeah, and that's like a wooden plaque if I remember right. So yeah, but that one is like the official Illinois State Historical Society plaque, the metal one.
Yeah.
So that's near like the baseball field when you enter Memorial Park.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, it's definitely. Yeah, it's out there.
I think it's as you enter.
Yeah, as you enter the park. Yeah, as you enter the
I
park.
don't know if I can drive that far or not, just.
Yeah, well,